Welcome back to Tiny Grimes Games, and I'm here with another Star Wars Destiny video. And today, I bring you another video in my series taking a look at Store Championship winning lists. And today, I'm looking at a deck from a Store Championship at General Games in Australia. What was really interesting about this is it was this deck, this version of Vader Raider, versus this version of Vader Raider in the finals. So clearly these two players are teammates and have played this deck a lot and were very successful to have the top two spots. So let's go ahead and take a look at this Vader Raider deck. I'm really excited about it because I've been interested to see what kind of direction does Vader Raider take without fast hands. It really changes the dynamic of the deck quite a bit, whereas with fast hands you could just put a fast hands on Vader, roll one of the dice out. If it's a 3, you get to hit it. Boom. And I was personally really worried, and still am, that Vader Raider just isn't quite viable without that ability, because if he rolls a damage, boom, they just disrupt it immediately. So what this deck seeks to do is really close to the way I was building Vader Raider at the very beginning of Spirit of Rebellion, which is pack in a lot of direct damage. My version was a bit different in that it still was running stuff like, I think I might have had 2 No Mercies in there to have even more direct damage. I had High Ground in there to give me more direct damage. And the problem I found was that it was fairly difficult to be able to do enough damage. But then also, like, you had this cap by going all in on damage spells and trying to do it that way with bait and switch. With 4-strike, there's a cap. There's a hard, finite cap on how much damage you're really going to be able to do. And so I found that I wasn't able to put out enough. This looks like a much more optimized version of that deck, so I'm really excited to see it. First thing to notice, though, there's no Holocron in this deck. So this deck is not messing around. There are no expensive things in this deck. There is one 2-cost Vibro Knife. Everything else in the whole deck is 1 or 0. And that may sound insane, like, okay, well, if you're not ever going to spend money, that's cool. Why not have a Rise Again to help Vader or something? But the thing is, you are spending the money. You're pretty much spending your 2 every turn on something, whether that's a Force Illusion to keep your guy alive, a backup muzzle for more damage, a lightsaber throw for more damage, removal. It's all about removing your opponent's threats and doing as much damage and optimizing that as much as you can. A really interesting include is On the Hunt. And On the Hunt is another one of these cards that really wants to have money. And so you're actually using $1 pretty much every turn to do On the Hunt. And so one of the things that really worries me about this sort of archetype, where you're like all in on X amount of damage and when I run out I'm in big trouble, is shield seems like a huge problem. And it seems like the builder of this deck, it was very aware of that. Vibro Knife, obviously include, right? Like, no one's going to be like, dude, you're a super genius, you put Vibro Knife in your deck? But I think the builder of this deck is going to be prioritizing getting Vibro Knife down quickly against decks that have shields. The other thing is On the Hunt. Like I said, it's an interesting include. And man, that deck wrecks shields deck. So having 4 anti-shields cards at a pretty cheap price. Notice no Kylo Saber. I mean, basically On the Hunt or Kylo Saber. In this deck, On the Hunt's actually better. So you have 4 that you can mulligan for if you know it's going to be a heavy shield matchup and get that going. So it's a pretty exciting list. It has some other weird oddities that make sense. He doesn't like you? Not here. And if you think about it, he doesn't like you not being here. Makes perfect sense, because you can't really run He Doesn't Like You if you don't have any dice to He Doesn't Like You, right? It feels really bad when you roll out Vader's dice and then have to He Doesn't Like You. So that's kind of an interesting exclusion, but I think it's fine. There's a lot of removal in here. Electroshocks, a doubt, deflects, feel your anger, isolations, overconfidence, lots of removal. Use the Force is an interesting one to me. I've stopped using Use the Force in pretty much all my decks. But in this deck it works really well. If what you want to do is do damage, Use the Force is great. I think Friends in Low Places is a must include in this kind of deck. So I'm really happy to see it here. if you can't have fast hands on Vader, you got to do something, and Friends in Low Places does that for you. So basically, every card in this deck is either removal or damage. Bait and switch, damage card. Use the Force, damage card. Lightsaber throw, damage card. Force strike, damage card. Friends in Low Places, it's actually a damage card because it's taking away the removal to be able to let you play something like a Use the Force. So bottom line is, this is a really interesting take on this build. I decided to take it for a spin, played a few games. It was smooth as butter. Like, you do miss out on not having Holocron. Like, it just, you're not going to get that end game scenario with the Tusken Raider where you're like, yes, I got the Mind Probe, I just roll it out and do awesome things. But on the other side, it's as consistent as you could possibly be. Everything is alive at all times. You don't ever draw 4 drops you can't play. You're never hoping to hit a special on a Holocron. It's just roll my dice out, hope I roll damage. If I don't, maybe it's a resource and I bait and switch it. If I don't, maybe I get to Force strike it. You're just always pushing damage. So I really like how the deck plays. I think it plays really smooth. An interesting question I have is, you know, like, so we already talked about shield matchups. It seems pretty good against, but nines is still scary even for this deck. Nines has a lot of health in those nines decks usually, with like nines, Unkar, and a trooper. That's a lot of health to have to chew through, and it worries me a bit that if nines gets that 6 start, like the first 2 or 3 turns, he gets, you know, logistics. So then he goes like holdout blaster into a riot baton, ends up killing Vader turn 2, turn 3. I don't know how this deck wins, and I think it's probably aware of that issue. But nines can do crazy things, so I wonder if maybe Maz's Castle comes out for cargo hold in this crazy nines meta. Now I know Maz's Castle is cool and helps you find what you need, but this deck doesn't really need stuff quite as much as other decks, right? Since you're not running Holocron, you're not digging for that. Yeah, it's cool to be able to say like, oh, this is a shields deck. I want to dig for On the Hunt or Vibro Knife, or I just really want to find my damage cards and Force Strike. But if we're running with the theory that it's just an ultra consistent deck where all the cards are always online and all the cards are good, maybe Cargo Hold is better. Cargo Hold does like nothing to this deck. I mean, it does a little bit that if a tech goes faster and you put Vibro Knife on the Raider, they can move it to Vader right before they kill him. But that's a really small problem to have when you can even do the opposite side and move a 4-speed over to Tusken Raider before Vader dies, and to be able to screw with 9 so much. I'm not saying Cargo Hold is right. I'm saying I want to try Cargo Hold. I think I'm going to be putting Cargo Hold in a version of this and giving it a run. Like I said, I'm a little worried about it against 9s. It's so good against a lot of the meta if you think about what the meta looks like. Being able to blitz down characters, it seems like it'd be pretty good against Poe Maz. It seems like it'll be amazing against shield decks like Han Rey and Qui-Gon Rey that are a little fragile. I'm a little worried about Phasma decks, like a Phasma, Guavian, Trooper, or whatever, being able to just rip off 2 dice a turn and have removal. I feel like that's going to put this deck in a little bit of trouble. It's just this really interesting, cool deck of what happens when you don't have Holocron. I've gone on the record and said, if your Vader Raider doesn't have Holocron, you're building it wrong. I don't know. It's certainly for this particular build, not having Holocron is right. Now, does that mean this is better than a Holocron build? I don't know. It kind of depends on what the meta is looking like, right? If you think you can blitz them down fast enough where you don't need to go into a mid-late game with some power on the board with that Raider with a Mind Probe, then this works really well. Like I said, though, I am definitely worried about the 3-character high-health 9s decks. That, to me, is where real testing needs to be done. I don't know enough about this field to know how many 9s decks were in it. So I don't have that kind of data. But I will say, interesting list. Check out General Games on YouTube. I'll link the finals match, the Vader Raider versus Vader Raider grudge match. But I like the deck. Give it a spin. If you're seeing a lot of knives, try it with Cargo Hold. See how it works. I'll see you next time on Tiny Grimes Games.